the session. I want to remind all of us that at about 8 o'clock or so, which is about 50 minutes from now, I'm going to ask each of the legislators to share with us in 1 or 2 minutes, and that includes you, Joe, this time, 1 or 2 minutes, what you've learned from what you have.
I yield my time to Joe.
Not on this part, Roger, you can't do it. I'd like for us to hear from you what you've gained from this exchange today, what you've learned from the questions that you're going to get, okay? I think that kind of feedback is useful. Now, something that I did not know, which Joe and Amanda and Roger have all emphasized, is that what Joe shared with us today, his perspective on the coming budget, is the same one that he shared with all the legislators, Republican legislators, in Lansing earlier this week, yesterday or last Wednesday. And I can, that normally does not happen. All right, so those of you in the room here got privileged information, so to speak. Now, I happen to think it should happen regularly, and maybe that'll begin to move us toward asking more questions. So now we'll go to the question part. And I'm going to go around the room as people raise their hands and allow you to direct questions. Now, if they become lopsided, I'm going to ask you to direct questions to individuals, particular individuals. But right now, we'll start it out free form. I know Roger in the back had a question. I'll get to you in a moment, Ken. But Roger had a question that he wanted to ask. So I'm going to start with you, Roger, and you could stand up, introduce yourself, and then direct your questions.
Do I still have to raise my hand, or can I just go ahead?
Well, I already knew you could give it to me, so I have these questions here that people gave me, so I want to start with you.
So, Roger Kuhn from Park Township here in Holland, and I think one of the questions that I'd like to hear answered really is related to, I guess, the pending healthcare challenges that we're going to have. Specifically around, given the constitutional and religious impact of the Health and Human Services mandate, what we're doing in Michigan to really stand against that. What can we do? What have we done? Are we going to be joining other states in a legal battle? I mean, that sort of thing. So that's really something on my mind. Thank you.
And did you direct that to one of them or all?
Whoever's most equipped to answer it, I guess.
Assuming you're talking about what we call Obamacare.
Right.
So, just to give you the historical perspective, the Senate last year, there were 3 options, basically. 3 options for a state to choose. You could have a state exchange, which you would end up setting up something similar to kayak. You go on, kayak to go book your travel or something. Something similar to that, so you can go out and pick out what kind of health care plan you want. You could do, there would be a federal option, which is almost the default option, and then there would be a state federal partnership. Last spring, the state Senate passed the partnership with the state exchange. The House then got that legislation, and we were very adamant that we wanted to wait for the result of the Sebelius lawsuit at the Supreme Court level. We didn't win, unfortunately. We were then very adamant that we were going to wait for the
that follow?
No, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, he wants to know what are the ramifications in terms of cost, taxes, so forth, with the 2 or 3 options.
That's a good question. I'm not sure if I feel prepared because just think.
Well, Fed's gonna be a big contributor initially, but then it all falls back on the states at some point. That's when it gets expensive. What we're either on our federal taxes or our state taxes.
But this was setting up the top.
We've already contributed, businesses have already contributed about $90 million to Washington. Basically, we're not getting anything back. Now, the immediate part of my House bill that wanted to do the state-federal partnership, which was the middle program, not as good as a state exchange, but far better than a federal exchange, in my opinion, is we would have gotten about $31 million back from Washington that we sent it. Okay, now, that wasn't my purpose of supporting it was because of the control, more than the 30 million. But without it, we do have to come up with about another 8 or 9 million of general fund money that for the computerization of this. Okay, we still have requirements from the federal government that we're obligated to do, and there's going to be general fund money. It's going to be, we call it machine money. That's going to have to pay for that instead of getting that grant from the federal government.
Another question, on unemployment insurance. When you're a business, you pay, it's employment insurance. But how underfunded is that really? I mean, because the business pays for that.
All right, let me repeat that question. The question is the unemployment insurance fund underfunded, and if so, by how much? Now, that's a tax that businesses pay per capita, per employee, based on the number of people that they employ.
Based on
All right,
prices.
so the question is that underfunded? All right, Joe, go ahead. But after that, I want to go back to Roger's question, because Roger, I thought, should have an opportunity to answer that as well. So,
Unemployment insurance, we fixed it last term. It is underfunded. I believe the amount is about $3 billion. That's a debt that we have to the federal government, just for unemployment insurance. We went out, and with that debt came a lot of strings attached, a lot of penalties that we had to pay the federal government. We went out and we bonded for that amount. So we got federal government debt. Rid of that, we have a bond debt that we can pay for that is less than what we were paying the federal government. Okay, we still have a debt, we are still underfunded, we're going to be paying that a long time. Those of you in business probably saw your rate go up a little bit, and you said, what are you doing to us? Snyder, right? Republicans, what did you do? You made this change and my rate went up. That rate would have gone up substantially more if we stayed with the federal government and their debt.
And this is kind of anecdotal, but last year in the bond world rated this bond as the best bond in the country because what we did to lower that debt. That's what the government said.
and I want to go back. Roger's first question had to do with the exchanges and Medicare, and I want to follow up if I know he doesn't answer all of it. But Roger, since you did vote differently than Amanda and Joe on that, maybe you'd like to share a little on the vote to make a state-federal partnership exchange. Amanda and Joe voted for that. Joe and Amanda voted for it, and Roger voted against it.
Well, Joe brought a good point of view to the table on that too. My no vote came out of the concern is, again, the sustainability of the federal funds and how we put our foot in our mouth in the federal area. But with that there, we do pay a price. And now, we probably, by making that vote, I made a statement that we don't want to tie it to those federal funds. But then we do relinquish some of our control. So Joe had a valid point there. It goes hand in hand. So.
What control did you want?
Well,
Why not
dictate. Now we're going to have Washington mandate.
Let me elaborate that for a little bit. Amanda used the analogy of a kayak or Expedia. Okay, the websites where you go to book a hotel. That's what the exchange is like, sorta. Okay. Now, clearly, not every hotel is represented on Expedia. Some hotels have a preferential treatment by Expedia. And when you have a state-run or a state partnership-run exchange, you're going to have a preferential treatment for the Michigan hotels in addition. Okay, so that's the kind of.
So now,
I just want to elaborate. Now, there were 5 questions before. Dave, Ken.
Yes, I would like to know from any one of you that can answer, how much percentage of the federal funds that we're receiving in grant money are we having to match with Michigan funds overall? Because there are a few that, for instance, let me give you an example. The windmills we have in the state are questionable whether they're doing any good. And I heard a figure of $12 billion being coming into the state of Michigan from the federal government for windmills. Are we putting up any Michigan money for them?
12 billion. I have
Over the
not,
next 10 years, I believe that is.
I don't know the answer. I don't even begin to know the answer. I mean, your question, Ken, is to what degree does the state have to match the money coming from the federal grant?
Right. And my follow-up to start with is, if we have to match that money and we don't have to, why are we taking that money?
I can't address that directly, Ken, but some of these grants are proportionally different. And the federal government has been very generous on some of these alternative energies, which we can agree or disagree with, compared to some of these other funds. Because there was a certain initiative in the Obama administration, which was green energy, and we have an example of that throughout the state. So some of those grants were much more generous and comparable to the highway funding, which is, that goes to like a 50-50 match. So I couldn't tell you, but I would lean that example of windmills would probably work more heavily.
It really doesn't matter what we accept if we have to match it, because the federal government can print the money. They can print the money and give it to us. And then if we have to match it, we're paying for it again. So we're paying for it to them, they're printing more money, they're diluting their money, they're making it worthless. Every time they do that, they're doing it to the tune of $85 billion a month right now. So they're diluting their money, we're taking it, and then if we have to match it, we're all losing out on it.
Right, Jim, I have a question, but Jim, you go first. And then Paul.
With the exchange thing being pushed back to 2015 now, that's correct? There are questions that it may eventually still come through. And with, in 2015, the bill that passed in the Senate can't be just revamped because once it goes past the term, it's dead, right? Is that the correct question?
Yeah.
And I've heard arguments about, well, we have more control if it's a partnership. We have more control with the state. When the reality of it is, in the Obamacare, the HHS secretary says, we're going to do whatever we want. We're going to override the state, so what difference does it make?
That's right.
All right? And it's like, it was pushed back to 2015. Maybe it'll be pushed back to 2016. Maybe pushed back to the 12th of November. That would be, I'd be happy with that.
Should have nullified.
Paul, did you have a question?
Well, kind of adding on to what Jim was saying there, I was looking at some of the video interviews that Joe Hoffman and Arlen Meekhoff had done in March, and I got I found some very interesting comments with that. I keep hearing about the 3 different options we had. Well, what about the 4th option to actually nullify and take a stand like these other states were doing?
That's
I heard some other...
Yes.
I asked that because I heard, hang on one sec. I asked that because I heard, well, Arlen Meekhoff said in the last Ottawa County Executive Committee meeting that, oh, well, people told us not to do anything because the Supreme Court will strike it down, or don't do anything because we'll have a new president. Well, nobody's really telling you guys to not do anything. I believe there was quite a few people saying, hey, let's go out there, take a stand, and nullify like all these other states are doing. And Oklahoma actually did do something. So my question is, how come we're not actually working to nullify it like other states?
Since you brought up Harlan Rupp, he would have liked to have been here this evening. But he is in Europe, trying to, pardon?
Netherlands.
In the Netherlands, trying to drum up investments there in Western Michigan. So he extends his regrets for not being here. Now, would any of you like to answer Paul's question? Why aren't we as a legislature, as a state, pursuing additional means of nullifying the applicability of Obamacare in Michigan and doing that in partnership with other states that are undertaking to do that? Roger, do you want to start?
Well, we've been dealt a bad set of cards up here, and I work off the process of, again, relying on these federal funds. That's where I make my decisions and work on the process. Because that could be another program out and keep this down. There's also some sense of reality in here too, and the elections have results. President Obama was reelected, and he has 4 years in office, and this is some earmarked legislative agenda he had, or his legacy, and so you're looking at how we're going to be able to push this off for 4 years. I question that.
That's right. Yeah. Just say no. Just say no.
Amanda, did you want to?
Remember, he's been reelected, and he has 4 years to hold on, which I don't agree with.
What are the penalties that we just let the federal government do it?
That was just one people
Yeah, does Canada want to know the problems? Joe, did you want to respond to?
No, you know, we looked at nullification. Our attorneys looked at it. We discussed it. We were told it's not practical. Well, I'm just telling you what was said. Now, if you take the opposite approach, and a state does, and I'm gonna mess up my example here, but there was an example given on gun control that, and I apologize, I'm not remembering it, but if we nullify, would you want to, what if a state did strict gun control?
like New York.
Yeah.
We've moved.
I mean, would you, I mean, can they just nullify the Constitution?
No.
They're just gonna say no to the Constitution? Or do you want the Supreme Court to stand up and say, no, the Constitution is true, we have gun rights? Well,
Michigan, everybody's clamoring about this registration tax. Well, the industrial tax, we're talking about the ammunition tax as much as that makes sense. But Michigan already has had registration forever.
well, let's take it to a far extreme. If a state comes and starts to take away guns, and nullifies the Constitution, should they have the right to do that?
No.
I don't think they should.
No.
Okay, that's kind of my point. Should we have the right to nullify?
There's a difference between, hang on, can I respond to
Obamacare
that?
isn't in the Constitution.
Yeah, Obamacare is not in the Constitution, that's different from the Second Amendment.
Of control over the dialogue here. Right. Joe.
With all due respect, the exchange is dead. And we can talk about it all night, but the exchange is dead. The federal government is moving ahead with its exchange. That has been resolved.
Okay, I'd like to ask a related question.
The whole thing then?
Yeah.
So they're gonna take over all of